They're spiritual beings having a human experience. Welcome, Spirit Bus 33 fam. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending some of your precious energy taking a little ride on the bus with me, your host, jyotishamara. I appreciate you. We're having this earth experience at the same time, and it's wild. It is totally wild. So let's lean right in. Like to start with that visualization practice just to clear the space here, just to give you that little bit of protective energy. I'm envisioning the colors orange, yellow, bright like the sun. Go ahead and fill in your own colors, the colors that come to your intuition, that come to you, that feel protective, that feel full of love, that feel healing. And go ahead, envision that encircling you. Just sit and let it go from your head all the way down to your feet. Pause this if you need to take a little bit of time. And then envision it going out, that protective, loving, joyous energy to your friends, to your fam, to the people that you love, and then out again to the collective. Fill in the words that you feel aligned with, the universe, everyone that you can think of, the entire world. Yes. Get grounded, get centered, grab yourself some matcha tea, some kombucha, some water, whatever you feel aligned with. Do a little check in before we get started. Do you need socks? Do you need a blankie? Get cozy. All right. Well, thank you so much. So much support from the last episode. So, just a little recap. I don't think we've figured out what's going on with the drone sightings. The last kind of update I received from the research I did, there have been like sightings, in about every state now, and we still have not been, told by any officials, what's been going on, or yeah. So that's still up in the air. We still have, some discovery to do about that. If you're sitting in any fear, I would strongly encourage you to lean into some practices to help subside the fear, some visualization. What do you want to experience here? After studying Jacobo Grinsberg, which I talked about last episode, is I really think that as a collective, is our visualization practices, our meditation, uh, just the ability to really manage our emotions, to not get sucked into this snowball, this rabbit hole. If there is fear present, of course, we're going to experience fear in this earth experience. That's typical. That's a normal emotion, but right now we don't have all the facts. So trying not to step in, to any fear that is hijacking, our day. It's a great emotion that helps us activate, into that fight mode or into that flight mode if we need to. But, as a collective, we're really activated more often, than needed from trauma, from, I think, technology, from movies, as we have taken in so many, horrific scenes from different movies. And, so I think our nervous systems need a little work here. So if you're not doing that work, please reach out to me so I can help you find some resources. We can chat a little bit, about what that might look like for you, no matter where you are, in the world. If you're in the United States or if you're not, reach out. Let's see what can be done. So I think as a collective, we can transform not only our own reality, but the reality around us by taking care, of ourselves, regulating our emotions. So the next thing that came to my awareness over the last week that I've been really stoked about doing a little bit of research on is the telepathy tapes. If you're not familiar, I found it on Spotify. I'm pretty sure it's even in more detail with a video, I believe she said on YouTube. Kai Dickens, telepathy tapes. So this is some amazing research that, of course, is not, I don't think it's public knowledge. And when I say public knowledge, I just mean it's not on mainstream, media. So it's going to be, if you have heard about it, maybe on an alternative site. When I do just a basic Google search, telepathy tapes, it just comes up the podcast. It doesn't come up with any news source or anyone covering it. But just like Jacobo Grinsberg in the last episode, remember, he was highly educated. So for you science-minded, research-based folks out there, these are not, just your everyday people. These are people that have went and did the education, have went and done a lot of studying. So Jacobo Grinsberg, he was I think he had a doctorate degree, and he really leaned into his theory of this synergic field that you could tap into, that had a lot of healing elements. And that's where you would see those spiritual surgeries and other quote unquote miracles. Well, here comes a very, similar, but a little bit different, highly educated, from affiliated with John Hopkins neuroscience. This is Dr. Diane, I think it's Hennessy Powell, Dr. Diane Powell. So she was studying savants and doing a lot of research on that. And then I think it was savants' skills within children with autism. And she kept getting these reports from families that their children with autism or their adult children with autism, were able to read their minds and, had the gift of telepathy, among other gifts, right? And so Diane is just intrigued and is doing all of this studying and blown away by the results. And then to get more information, I totally invite you to do your own little deep dive on the telepathy tapes by Kai Dickens, because she covers a lot of Diane's work, but then also was so interested in it herself that she went and did the experiments, the research with Diane and some of her own outside of Diane's work too. And it's very, very intriguing. Now, remember, part of the reason why we're not hearing about this, and this is covered in the telepathy tapes, is that they describe it. I think it was actually Diane herself that was describing, science as materialism, which they described as, all things in our world are results of physical matter that can be measured and observed per science. So if you start adding in telepathy, psychic abilities, and there it goes way beyond that with what they're finding with these children with autism, the science community, or scientific research, is not going to provide the funding, to do, more and more meetings with these families, and to fund the all the expenses it takes to do a really good research project. So I mean, as you can imagine, like, unless you're like independently wealthy and have the ability to just put all of your resources into doing this, these types of projects, so to speak, is that you're going to want to have some type of funding. And Diane's research, is that there's some skepticism in the scientific community, which, remember, Jacobo Grinsberg's, like, scientific community research funding was all on board until he started proving that we have the ability to connect to this quantum field, so to speak, and that we can transform reality. And once he really started proving that, the funding backed out. He started being called eccentric. He started being called like pseudoscience. And then he ultimately disappeared with his work. So we have Diane's work here, and Diana is very vocal that she understands how the scientific minded research works. And so, she knows that she could be, scoffed at. She could be, called eccentric. That, she could be very much pushed out, of her field that she, took so long to get her education in, just because of reporting her findings. And it sounds like she's willing to take that case, but knows that it has to be on point. On point. The research has to be so on point. So in the telepathy tapes, they really go into detail about, a girl named Mia and her mom, Ileana, from Mexico. And this isn't able to be used in Diane's research because of formality of the mom touching Mia as it happens, like a hand on top of the head type of touch. And even though everyone around, is watching Mia perform these great acts of telepathy, her mom is thinking a number, and Mia is able to type that number out on her iPad with just her mom's finger on top of her head. Random numbers came up from people all around, around in the experiment. Um, but Diane knows, that because there's physical touch, like, the scientific community will, say that there's, been some alteration, to make, Mia, know the numbers. I don't know. Some at one part in the tape, it's like, what do they think? Like, she's doing Morse code on the head. Everyone that was watching it knew for sure that there was no movement happening. It was just the comfort level. It's kind of like if you're learning how to ride a bike, and your parent is holding on to the wheels at first, which is a good description. I think maybe they used driving a car and holding onto the wheel for a bit in the analogy. But I recommend watching that. I think was episode number 1 of Telepathy tapes. Very fascinating. The second one, just mind blowing, about a keel, and a whole, another family. And again, I suggest you watch it for yourself. It is so cool. What I really liked about this one was that, like, Deepak Chopra, like, even came to, like, meet Akil and his family, and was mind blown at the end of it. Again, no funding, and I'm only on the end of episode number 2. It has completely changed, my viewpoint. Part of what I did previously to, the work that I'm doing now was I did work with children with autism, and so this has just now I ponder, is, um, you know, are all children with autism able to read minds? Do they have the gift of telepathy? And is some of the behaviors that you're seeing, the hand biting or self-injurious behaviors or just loud vocalizations of frustration, is it, an attempt to communicate that they understand what's going on? Or if there were some more resources available within the program. So it's very interesting, is that I am sure that to groups of people, this sounds absurd. But this research is quite compelling. So if you find that you're intrigued by this, I would say check out those telepathy tapes. Um, I think it was on episode number 2. Uh, this quote from Nikola Tesla was on there, and it said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than all the previous centuries of existence." I thought that was really telling, definitely. I wonder I wonder what would have happened if from a young age this was incorporated into our life, even through our if it's through our families or if it was a school, if we had some of this supernatural, let's just see what our gifts are, is I wonder just how different, we would be if we, maybe for those of you that identify as a sensitive or an empath, if there was, some education around whose emotions are whose, as we're growing up, to where, we're able to really understand what we're feeling, or all sorts of different gifts that, we're told aren't real. I wonder just what the world would be like such a different place. Even if there was like a heavy duty mindfulness built in, mindfulness practices, meditation, and I think we're going to see a shift with that. Like I think we're seeing more and more families that speak the language. If you're listening to me, it's a certain frequency of what we're talking about, that more and more families are opening, the door to allow their children to explain, things that they're experiencing, and encouraging them to go deeper. Children that are coming in talking about past lives, that seem to know what's going on here and speaking a language that they haven't, about it that they haven't been taught. So, yeah, lots of amazing avenues to go down to learn a little bit more, about our abilities. For those of you that are maybe like around my age, like I'm, Gen X age group, is that I remember a time when, on talk shows, like it was common for psychics to be, invited to the show. And it was kind of like, known that there were psychics. And I remembered even, hearing about, and I wasn't sure where the memory was coming from, but hearing about like psychics involved in, law enforcement and helping police officers, solve cold cases. So I took a little look at the National Criminal Justice Reference Service, and I found an article titled Psychics and Police Work from 1993. The beginning annotation states, "The usefulness of psychics in police investigations is controversial, but psychics have long been and will undoubtedly continue to be involved in unsolved criminal investigations." There's some other, involvement with the government, with people with abilities, different abilities that you can look up. Project Stargate, uh, or I think it was renamed later, like Grill Flame. Not just the CIA, though, also the Defense Intelligence Agency. You can find out more about that by going to CIA.gov. From the research that I did, it's interesting because a lot of it is categorized under parapsychology. And even though you do have access to a lot of the articles on here, a lot of them are written in code. So that's interesting. Some of them you can read through, they're pretty lengthy. But a lot of them are written in some type of code. The reason why I thought this was so fascinating, to have documentation of law enforcement and government working with people, that have psychic abilities or, different types of abilities of able. I'm trying to remember what the name was, of being able to see locations around the world. Oh, it's called remote viewing. So if law enforcement, government or working with people or doing studies on people with this ability, then there has to be buy-in to that these abilities are real, and especially if police are using psychics to solve cases, then obviously that wouldn't be happening if the information that the psychic was providing wasn't beneficial or wasn't accurate. So, so we can start kind of piecing together that there is this like under, the rug kind of like, spoken like this is real. But then when you go to study it or you go to really find out what's going in and deep dive into it, then no, it's pseudoscience. It's not real. And in many circles, if you start bringing this up, is you are, pushed out and, not taken serious. So again, just like the end of the last episode, is for myself, as a clinical therapist, that also has most of my body, if I'm stepping in two different areas, a clinical therapist with leaning over most of me in the holistic, world is I prefer to just lean into it's real, is that it's always pseudoscience until it's not, it's always a conspiracy theory until it's not. And there's so many cases, around the world, not only from these telepathy tapes, but if you study Ram Dass and, his guru Maharaji, there is so much there, about just the abilities that Maharaji had, that definitely exceeded, what science would say, our abilities as a human, are. If you're interested in more of that, there's the Ram Dass podcast on Spotify, and I would suggest just listening to it, from episode number 1. He really takes you through, his journey of he, was doing similar work to what I'm doing now, and after going to India and after meeting Maharaji and after, really seeing the difference between, Western and Eastern philosophy was he was, definitely knew that science was not taking everything into consideration and, got to a point where he, I think, I can't remember if he was not able to practice anymore or if he chose not to be, um, but again, like another person telling the encounters of these supernatural things, so to speak. And so while we are, you know, having these unidentified drones and, contemplating with our friends and fam what's going on here, is it our own government? Is it Galactic Federation? Is it just some really rich people playing a hoax? Is it, a different country? All of these different things. Um, you know, I don't know. I think that it's, time to lean out of the box here. It's time to jump out of the box and start asking yourself, what are some other possibilities here? And also, maybe not even on the macro level, is like, what are all the possibilities with you? How are you able to transform your own reality? What gifts do you have? Have you ever had a moment, where you predicted what was going to happen next, or, you know, you dreamt what was going to happen, or you spoke out loud something and then it happened, or all sorts of different things, and getting really curious about what does that mean for you? Is that just a coincidence, or is it something repeating? Is it a pattern? It's just like, I don't know, do a little deep dive. And maybe, if none of that resonates for you, maybe it is just having tolerance that other people believe it, that in someone else's reality, they are experiencing something completely different. I love what Sanaya Roman says here in Personal Power Through Awareness. She says, life is harder when you think you have to defend your beliefs, thoughts, or self. I will suggest that most of the things you think you have to defend are beliefs and ideas that are not yours anyway. You rarely get offended and hurt when someone disagrees with the things you are sure about. The areas where you are not certain, where you feel insecure, are those you often feel the most need to defend. I feel like that's such a powerful statement because, I see often, in different belief systems, science being one, maybe somebody's political views, maybe someone's, religious beliefs, getting so angry when people see reality different, which is a little perplexing, right? Like, is there a piece in us that's questioning it and that feels so uncomfortable, that we project that uncomfortability and anger towards the person? She goes on to say, the next time you feel you have to defend something about yourself, ask yourself, why am I feeling I must defend this? Be willing to let your heart and wisdom smile upon people, sending them your love and acceptance. Do not feel you must say anything. Be who you are. If you do not know the answer to something, simply say, I don't know. Don't try to be perfect all the time. Do not think that to be loved, you must have all the answers and you must never be afraid or look weak. For those of you who are willing to be vulnerable, you will find more love coming to you. And I think that's kind of a beautiful way, of wrapping up, this episode. Is like, we can be taking a journey, not knowing and collecting, different data and research and all of these things, piecing together what we think our own reality is, and we don't have to be standing with one of those pitchforks ready to, give someone a jab if they don't believe what we believe. Like, there's room for all realities here. And like, side note, they're all going on at the same time anyway. We are having an experience with, we can't even count how many realities are going on because every single person is really honestly having their own reality. No one is having the same exact earth experience as me or you that's listening. So it is not in our best interest to fight one another over whose reality is right, because we're not even the ones walking in each other's shoes. Instead of just showing up with as much love and tolerance. And I'm not saying, to allow someone to harm you in any way. That's not what I'm saying. I think that that gets distorted, is that no one that's saying, love and tolerance and patience is saying allow someone, to harm you. That's completely different. But I don't think that we need to be up in arms. towards one another. I think that we can see, on the macro level, what that does to societies. It hasn't done anything good. Thanks for taking this little ride with me. If you're still sitting on the bus, you're a G. Thanks for being a Spirit Bus 33 fam. Let's do a little reading here from the Osho deck. First card, aloneness. When this card comes up, to me, it really speaks volume about spending time with your own consciousness. Whatever that practice means for you, turn off the technology, turn down the music, turn it off, get into a place, just be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a meditative state. However, I do strongly encourage that because I think we can really connect with ourselves in a really deep way. But this aloneness card is, can you be with your own consciousness? And you may immediately be saying, oh, but all the thoughts, you know, yes, and that is one of the reasons to practice being with ourselves, is to start to understand, how we can transform, our inner reality, so that the mind is not taking over, so how that we can increase that space between thoughts bigger and bigger and bigger, because that is the space where reality is created. Second card, isolation. If you're a bright light, if you feel that you want to help humanity, if you feel that your purpose here, is great, is something, very special, even if that doesn't resonate with you, maybe you just bring cheer to people, joy to people, maybe you have a gift. Is when this card isolation comes up, it's like, hey, if all of us that understood this message right here were staying at home and not going out and, not interacting with, the experience, like, think about that. If everyone was just isolating, all this world would miss out on all of these unique messages. They would miss out on you. Last card, going with the flow. When we're resistant, when we have resistance to this life experience, it makes it so much harder to swim against the current, right? But we can learn how to kind of do a little dance. We can learn how to, swim in a certain way where we're just going with the flow. Another mindfulness practice. Well, fam, it has been a ride. I'm pretty excited because I'm ending at about 33 minutes. That was my original goal for this. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I hope to see you next time. Leave a comment. Tell me who you are. I would love to engage with people, especially if you're listening all the way through. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Your spiritual beings having a human experience.